I watch a lot of educational videos, mainly things around science, natural history, biology, psychology, space, whatever happens to catch my attention. And while I'm watching them, I rarely feel like I don't understand what they're communicating, unless maybe they're getting into the math behind a certain concept. But most of the time I'm following along thinking, yeah, this makes perfect sense, until I try to explain the video to somebody else. I remember the general shape of it, I remember that it was interesting, I remember how landfills are actually a marvel of engineering that requires a ton of infrastructure to work, but when it comes to the specifics, things get a little fuzzy. Basically, there was this thing that affected another thing, which has made me realize something pretty uncomfortable. Understanding something while someone explains it to you is not the same thing as knowing it. It feels like learning, but a lot of the time what you're actually experiencing is recognition. Someone else has organized the information, they've chosen the examples, they've built the connections, and as they walk you through it, your brain says, yes, I can follow this. But the information has only been lightly imprinted onto your brain, not recorded. And I think this is one of the strangest problems of living in a world where we have an access to almost unlimited information, because it's not a problem that humans throughout history have had to face. Information has never been more abundant or easier to consume, but that doesn't mean that it's easier to keep. In fact, I would argue it's incredibly more difficult unless you are intentional about it. I can watch 5 documentaries, listen to 2 podcasts, read a few articles, and reach the end of my day feeling like I've filled my brain with knowledge, but how much of that did I actually retain? What could I explain tomorrow? What has changed about the way that I understand the world? Because maybe learning is not just the moment when the information enters your brain. Maybe learning is the work that your brain has to do afterwards. And that brings me to the larger idea that I've been thinking about, which is that learning takes effort. It doesn't just happen to you. Obviously, we learn things naturally as we move through life. We have experiences, we make mistakes, we grow in our relationships, and the world forces us to adapt whether we are actively trying to or not. But if you want to deliberately understand something, if you want to retain an idea, develop a skill, or slowly become a more knowledgeable person, then you have to participate in that process. Learning is a skill, and like any other skill, it takes effort to be good at it. I had ADHD growing up, and one of the unfortunate things that school unintentionally and incorrectly taught me about myself was that learning was hard, and I didn't like it, which is completely untrue. Struggling to learn in a particular environment or from a particular person does not mean that you aren't good at learning or don't like that subject. Struggling to sit still does not mean that you're not curious, and struggling to remember something for a test does not mean that you're not intelligent. Coming back to the abundance of information, I have to bring up that I believe that YouTube is the single greatest online platform that has ever been created. I will die on this hill. There is not another platform like it, and I am so glad that it exists. Managing finances to cooking salmon to quantum particles to fixing your car to how we use fossilized copepods as index fossils to determine the geologic age of rocks. There is something for everyone. Take a step back and realize just how insane of a concept that is. If you were talking to someone from the 1800s and you told them you had a magic book that talked to you and showed you pictures about anything that you wanted to know, well, one, they may not believe you, but if they did, I bet a fellow lover of learning would do absolutely anything and pay however much they could scrape together for that magic book. And we get it for free. And all of us are contributing to it. It's this enormous, chaotic, human-powered library of culture and knowledge, and I believe it is the most powerful educational tool humanity has ever built. But access to information is not the same thing as learning, and I think that distinction matters now more than it ever has before, because we consume information almost constantly now. There's always another video, another podcast, another article, another point of view, and the platforms are designed to keep that stream moving. The instant one idea ends, another begins. Sometimes I wonder what the limit is to how much meaningful information we can take in before it all starts running together. What is that sweet spot? Can I watch 3 dense educational videos in a day and actually retain them? What about 5? 10? At what point am I no longer learning and I'm simply just moving information through my head like water through a pipe? I don't know the answer to that. I imagine it depends on the person, the topic, how difficult the material is, how much you already know, and whether or not you give yourself headspace and time to think without consuming more. But I'm becoming more convinced that one of the most important parts of learning is giving your brain time to do something with that information. Because familiarity can be deceptive. When someone explains an idea clearly, it feels obvious. You think, of course, I understand this. But recognizing a good explanation when you hear it is very, very different from producing that explanation yourself. The real test is whether you can take the idea apart, rebuild it in your own language, and explain it to someone else in a way that makes sense. And the moment you try, you discover all the places where your understanding quietly falls apart. So, nuclear fusion is when two atoms fuse together under heat and pressure, and the energy released has something to do with E equals mc squared and stars somehow. That moment where your explanation breaks down is useful. That's your brain finding the gaps. Trying to explain something forces you to move from, hey, I've heard this before, to I actually understand how the pieces connect. And unless you're a robot, you are probably not going to watch a video once and then be able to explain it perfectly. Usually I need to watch something, sit with it, think about it later, maybe watch it again, or talk through it with somebody. Then slowly the idea starts becoming mine. Not mine as I invented it, but mine as in it has become part of how I understand the world. I think that is the difference between collecting information and actually learning. It requires your brain to retrieve information instead of only receiving it. It requires repetition, requires connecting to something that you already understand. And it requires stopping. I think that last one may be the hardest part for me, because when you love learning, the temptation is to keep going. One more video, one more topic. But being intentional about learning is knowing when to stop consuming and just let your brain work with what you just gave it. Maybe instead of watching 6 more videos, you stop there and go for a walk. Maybe you explain it to someone and realize halfway through that you need to go back and watch it again. Or maybe at the end of the day, you just try and recall not just what you watched, but 1 or 2 things that you learned. There's also something encouraging to me about viewing intelligence this way, because if learning is a skill, then being smart is not just some fixed trait that you either received at birth or not. There are different levels of intelligence, and some people process things faster or remember certain kinds of information more easily, but everyone can become better at learning, better at asking questions and improving your own memory. You learn one idea, which gives you the context for the next one, and the next idea has somewhere to attach. Eventually, those subjects that once seemed completely unrelated start connecting. History helps you understand politics. Biology helps you understand behavior. Psychology helps you understand relationships. Technology helps you understand culture. The more you genuinely learn, the more hooks your brain has for new information to hold on to, and that information starts to build on itself over time. We have more information than we could ever consume in 1,000 lifetimes. The challenge is deciding what deserves our attention, how deeply we want to understand it, and what we are willing to do to make it stay. I'm still trying to figure out what that looks like for me. How much should I consume? How often should I revisit things? What things should I write down? Which ideas are worth following further, and which I should simply appreciate for a moment and then let go? But I think the first step is realizing that learning does not end when the video does. The goal is not to encounter the most information, finish the most books, or watch the most videos, or collect the most interesting facts. My goal is to let some of those ideas take root and allow those ideas to change the questions you ask, the conversations you have, the things you create, and the way that you see the world. That's all for now. I'll see you next time.